Are you ready? Fight! Go!
Right up here we have a new enemy type, the Pagos. They are rat-like creatures, and they have a crossbow. They're not so hot at the hand-to-hand combat thing, but they fire very rapid bolts, and that can very easily stun you enough for stronger enemies to take pot shots at you. Right here, this tutorial scroll was telling us to hit enemies with our running punches or kicks while they're lying down, and of course we already knew that. But yeah, they fire crossbow bolts and they react very quickly. Those are really the only things you need to know about them. And over here we have one new enemy type, the Xenus. The Xenus are wolf-like creatures and they have 2 daggers. They have 2 combos at their disposal, that one you just saw where they swing their arms in a windmill fashion, and another one where they spin across the ground. Now you can interrupt the first combo I mentioned, but not the second one. That's what makes it more deadly. This tutorial scroll is just telling us to be careful about when we open treasure chests, and sometimes it comes out of a treasure chest, which is seems a little counterproductive. Now the Xenus and the Pagos aren't that difficult to fight when you have plenty of room. And while there are a lot of open streets in this stage, there are also a lot of alleys, or small crannies like the one we just fought in. And the enemies will often refuse to move out of those and into more open areas. Right up here is another alley, and we don't have our weapons to help us out this time, so we're going to use our POW meter to activate a combo instead. After I'm done getting kicked in the back of the head. The Xenus are especially deadly in closed areas because they're really beefy and their arms reach pretty far. But we took out this area with minimal damage, I would say. I have the most trouble in this world with this opening section because there's oh my god. Now hopefully you can see what I mean by them firing arrows rather quickly. But yes, I have the most issues with the opening section of this world. Not so much after that. Now the first world only consisted of 1 level. But after the first level, each world consists of multiple levels. This one consists of 3. And how you know when you're done with a world is when you encounter a boss. Now here's something we didn't cover last time because we didn't have enough space to do it. Dashing kick spamming. You can use your dashing kick to hit enemies that are on the ground, which knocks them over again. And assuming you have an open or wide area like this street right here, you can just keep doing that infinitely, and the other enemies won't be able to catch up with you. Now if it's a really small area, you might not want to try this, because you'll end up in a corner. But yes, we just disposed of 3 separate enemies with very minimal risk using our dashing kick and just spamming it on them over and over. Alright, now that we cleared out all the enemies in this area, we can proceed past the gates. I recommend going to the far right first and then looping around. I believe we're about to encounter another new enemy after we deal with this Pagos, who again we can destroy using our sliding kick if we want to, simply because there's no one else around. And yeah, right up here, this is our first flying enemy, the Kalis. The Kalis is very slow to react to our attacks. They tend to block a lot. So just repeatedly going on the offensive works very well against them. We can knock them very easily out of the air with our dashing attacks as well. They might be the easiest enemies we encounter in this level, and the only real threat is when they dive bomb us to knock us over. They do have another combo they can use with their wings, but assuming you're attacking them at the time, they're never going to have enough time to get that combo out. Now we're playing as Sayomi, and we just used her kicks to simultaneously get rid of 2 enemies, which is a rare opportunity. With the other characters at least, but not with Sayomi. Sayomi's kicks are very, very useful. They're very wide in their range, and they cover pretty much every area directly in front of you. So if you're being assaulted solely from the front, using Sayomi's kicks is a good way to get rid of the enemies quickly. There's also very little space between her kick combos. So you can just keep smashing the kick button, and the slower enemies won't be able to do anything but block repeatedly, like the Kalis here. We accidentally brought our fight into a separate area where we drew the attention of other enemies, which means they started attacking us as well. This isn't too bad though, because this area right here is rather large, and that gives us plenty of room to move around. Yeah, it really can't be overstated how useful Sayumi's kicks are. Oh, what do we have here? Yep, that's telling us how to use the Desperation attack, which I don't really plan on using ever. Alright, so for the next minute, or a couple minutes, I just run around in the circle around these buildings until I attract all the remaining enemies, so we're gonna skip to when the gate opens and we get somewhere more interesting. So up here, across this bridge that was locked before, we enter the town square with a fountain in the middle. And there are a lot of treasure chests here, but there are also a lot of enemies. And they try to gang up on us, just circle around us. But that doesn't really work out in their favor, because this is probably the largest area in the stage. Which gives us plenty of room to move around. No matter where you attack your enemies at in here, you're probably going to draw the attention of other foes. But you shouldn't worry too much about that. Most of them are... Oh, hey! That was our magic attack. We can also use that when our POW meter is full. Now, I said before I didn't know what the magic leaves were for. It turns out the magic leaves are what power those magic attacks. So just to be clear, you need to have a full POW meter and a magic leaf in order to pull that off. Now, of course, magic leaves move cautiously through this level, or we may find ourselves face down in an alley. Yeah, we already covered that. Since magic leaves are in limited... Oh, man. We need to go back and look at that again. This is how blocking works in this game. You need to press the block button at just the right time to parry, like in some character action games or in some fighting games. You can't just hold the block button down. You only block for a split second, so you need to time it perfectly. Now, as I was saying before I was interrupted by game... Oh, here's another one. We can lift up chests and throw them at enemies. It doesn't deal very much damage, but it does knock them over. However, it isn't very useful because we can knock over enemies much easier just by using our dashing attacks. But we'll get to something else we can throw later that is more useful, but for now, just remember you can throw treasure chests. Now again, as I was saying before I was interrupted by game mechanics, the magic leaves are in limited supply, so you don't want to waste your magic attacks, only use them when you're certain you need them. Alright, now that we're done in the town square, I believe we get to move indoors for the first time in this game. Yep, welcome to the inn. The inn is where we're going to be spending the rest of this level, and it's the most interesting part of this level both visually and mechanically. The inn is basically a maze with many small to large rooms that contain varying number of enemies in each. The larger rooms often have more enemies in them, and there are some hallways that only contain one enemy in them, which is really no trouble at all. It's very difficult to lead your fight into other battles and have more enemies than you wanted following you, because all the enemies tend to dislike leaving their designated areas. Everything inside the inn is far more segregated than elsewhere in this level, is what I'm saying. Here's an example of a hallway with only one enemy in it, and it's one of the weakest enemies we've encountered so far, so really no trouble. Now you can see on the map just how maze-like the inn is, and how many rooms there are that we can enter off to the sides. And just like the town square, the inn is full of treasure chests, but the more treasure chests a room has, the more likely it is to be packed with enemies. I believe this room we're in right now has the most enemies in it. New enemies tend to keep spawning in this room after you think you're already done. So always keep on your toes and don't go after those chests until you're absolutely sure you're finished in here. The bright side is that this is the most difficult room in the end, so after this, things kind of settle down a little. You might have noticed that we've been picking up a huge abundance of projectile items, projectile weapons to throw at enemies. And we're going to want to save most of those, but we can waste a few toward the very end. We have been taking a lot of damage in here, but like I said, this is the most difficult room in the end, so we'll be fine. Besides, there are a ton of treasure chests with health pickups in them. And after this guy, we're still not done. I believe another one just hops out of nowhere. Yep, right over here. Oh god. Getting hit in the back is pretty much a death sentence because you can't block from behind, and you can't interrupt your enemy's attack from behind either. So if you start getting comboed in the back, you're just gonna take that damage no matter what. Alright, now that we have the hardest room in the inn out of the way, what's left is just to sweep up. And there's not a lot of sweeping up to do, but that doesn't mean it won't take a while because this place is a maze. So I'll get back to you when there's only a couple of enemies left.
Are you ready? Fight!
Alright, welcome back, and no, you didn't miss anything. This is just where the game dumps us at after that cutscene. And it has really pretty music, but we're not going to be hearing it very much. There are only 14 enemies in this level, but the level itself is also very small. It's basically just one really long hallway with a few turns here and there. The enemies we fight in here are mostly the same as the previous level, except they throw in a few old ones and a couple of new ones that, well, we'll talk about the new ones when we see them in more abundance. For now, all you need to know is that this level is something of a breather. Even if you really struggle here for whatever reason, which you shouldn't, it is a very small level. This does give us more opportunity to talk about the game's overall structure, though. I mentioned back in the previous level that each world contains multiple levels ending in a boss. There are 5 worlds in total, but you might be wondering how many levels there are. Well, there are 11. The awkward number of levels and the awkward number of levels per each world inevitably means that some worlds are going to be significantly longer than others. But I think that's fine, especially when the atmosphere in this game is so, nice. The rest of this level is just a trek up this hill. Oh hey, it's those lizard men that we saw back in the first level. But anyway, the rest of this level is just a trek up this hill to a boat. And we don't really see anything special on the way there. There's mostly just a lot of pagos. So we're gonna skip toward the end of this level, because I assure you, you won't have any trouble here. Now, if this level has any parts that could be considered difficult, it would probably be this section right here when you're right next to the boat. Because you're on a very tiny square platform, and it's easy to get backed into a corner. But we'll be fine, especially since we're so near the end and we only have 2 more enemies to take out. On the bright side, you get to see how obnoxious the pagos can be when they spam their arrows. It can be difficult to even get a hit in on them. But yeah, that's about it. Not a very long level, not a very difficult level. But it does have a lot of atmosphere to it. Welcome to an even shorter level. This one is a lot harder though. We meet a new enemy type here that we saw briefly in the previous level. The Voltus. Now the Voltus move very, very slowly. So it's easy to take them out one-on-one, but they deal massive damage and they like to gang up on you. The solution to this is to spread them far apart and then take them out separately. The easiest way to spread them apart is, of course, with your dashing attacks. It's honestly a very easy level when you figure out how to segregate the enemies properly. But if you try to take them out in a big group, then you'll probably die within seconds. So yeah, the strategy here is fairly simple. I do like the level itself though, the layout of the level I mean. It's very small, but it's still visually interesting, and I like that the boat constantly rocks up and down. There are a lot of treasure chests here. Now, whether you want to get them out of the way ahead of time is your choice. Getting them out of the way ahead of time may make it easier to deal with the boss, but waiting until the boss appears may make it easier to get health pickups. Personally, I prefer to get them out of the way before the boss gets here. Oh, it's time. Wait, no, it's not. I just picked up another tutorial. I prefer getting them out of the way before the boss gets here so it's easier to move around and evade him. Well, crud. I wanted to get all the knives out of our inventory before the boss, but I must have picked up a few extra I wasn't aware of. Now this shark guy's most devastating attack is that he can summon swordfish right out of the ocean. And to avoid that, we simply have to run to the other end of the boat. Now, both crossbow bolts and axes knock over the enemy and deal significant damage, but knives are useless. They won't knock over bosses, and they deal piss for damage. All told, after you get done spamming projectiles at him, the shark boss isn't that different from the bear guy. Like I said, the only real attack you need to worry about is the one where he summons swordfish. That doesn't mean he's easy, though, because he still has that leaping attack that the bear guy had, only he uses his hook instead. And he has a combo where he chatters his teeth at you and chases you around. Both of these are very difficult to block properly, so I recommend just running away when that happens. You can't really knock him down with your normal attacks. Just doesn't work out that way. So you want to do one of your dashing kicks at him, and if he falls down, then you can continue spamming your dashing kick at him, and hopefully that'll do the trick.